We are all coming to stage at the same time, so please give a warm hand to all our panelists. Nice to see you again. Many similar faces from last year. Last year, if you remember, we announced some big partnerships. This year, we are going to see the more broader view internationally. What are other nations doing in the similar area, and what can we learn here? What we are sure about in Estonia is that digital disruption affects nations the same way it affects any other industry. Like we've seen before with the financial world, we will see with nation states. Nation states have been like that just 200, 300, 400 years. They're fairly new concepts. And there is no reason to believe that they stay as they are today. Nation states are one of the most bureaucratic institutions out there, most inefficient. And technology can help to solve that. And we have seen that already, some progress in Estonia, and for e-residents you have experienced that also, how everything can be done digitally, how we opened our nation to borderless world so that every person can become our digital citizen, how we introduced data embassies so that even without physical land, our nation would keep up and running, how we are going to introduce next year digital nomad visa so that you could enter to this nation also physically, not only digitally, how we are going to introduce crypto tokens to enhance collaboration between e-residents and Estonians, how we are going to introduce AI-based decision-making in the nation so that to eliminate more these faulty human mistakes, and so on. And you can see through this process that eventually nations are something very different compared to what they are today. And hence, I'm very happy about our panelists who flew here just for you guys from around Europe. They are the digital leaders of Europe in different fields and very respected internationally. And I'm very honored to have them here. So please, once again, let's welcome our dear guest for flying here for you. Aida. She's the youngest, has been the youngest minister in the history of Sweden. You're still young.
I hope so.
Now back in private sector. And you're known for many reforms in education sector. So first question to you is like, the education hype has always been there that our education system is past, it's not anymore currently valid, and we have seen the AI and everything that is there, and many things we just don't need to learn anymore. What has been done in Sweden regarding that? What have you managed to pull through yourself, and do you see that there is some hope that the education system for our children will be something that is more useful?
Well, I think that the educational systems in Estonia, Sweden, Europe, and also across the globe really need to modernize in this sense, and that's something we've started doing in Sweden, of course. I mean, we're a country where the digital infrastructure has always been quite prominent. We have the know-how, but honestly speaking, we've also just started working strategically with digitizing our educational system. So we have adapted a digital strategy for the country, but I think that it needs to be developed even more together with the tech community. And for instance, one thing we've done is that we've introduced coding as part of the curriculum in the early years.
So is it really actually working? Because there are rumors that in Estonia also kids develop coding at schools. It's not entirely true. There are some classes who do that. So in Sweden, it actually works?
Well, we just introduced it last year, so it's still very new. Hopefully it will work, but I think there's still this conflict where actually a lot of the students are before the teachers when it comes to this knowledge. So we're actually educating our educators so that they can keep up with this.
Thank you. Audience and e-residents and Estonians, you do have the app also, so we can have ask questions also throughout the session, so feel free to do that, and some people will let me know if there are questions. Éric,
I'm still young.
Still very young, Éric. But through that young age, you have extremely wide background in IT, and now being also member of parliament in France. France is one of our favorite countries because of the recent developments and because of Macron, who came and saved Europe. The values you have, kind of, we really love that. And it seems that you have this new spirit, like everyone tries to do something again. Like 3 years ago when I visited France, then people were quite like pessimistic. But now it's like after new leader, you're like a new face again. And do you see that often we get criticism that we can do things in Estonia because we are small, but France is much bigger? Like, do you see that the size matters? And what have been your reforms? And do you believe that this is the time actually for France to do something big?
I do not really think that there's a relationship between the size and the capacity you have to perform a success. By the way, if we have to compare the experiments in France, for instance, to Estonia in some area, such as e-Residency or the e-inclusion, I have to say that we have some work to do. That means it is not because we are larger than Estonia in terms of size of country that we are in advance. So we have to do with the size you have. It's okay.
But the recent reforms, like, do you see that they have worked to become more startup-oriented nation? And do you see that member of parliaments, also others, are supporting that? Because it's quite challenging, I assume, to do anything like that.
Since Emmanuel Macron arrived,
yes.
Yeah, I think there's something changed. I agree with that. When I listen to people coming from international country, something has changed. If I listen to Emmanuel Macron yesterday morning at Viva Tech, speaking about the vision around the IT and new technology, definitively we assume that we have something different between a US approach or Asia approach, and we're building together, not only from France, but together, an European approach on IT, which is balancing between the common goods and the innovation. We can do both. In the other place, we have so much regulation. Or some other place, we don't have some kind of freedom or something like this. So I think something has changed. Macron is leading a new vision in France. I think it's profitable for Europe. But at the same time, I do know that there is some new innovation all across Europe. So we are all together in the move.
Okay, good to hear. Do audience agree that there is lots of innovation in Europe? Raise your hand if you believe so. Raise your hand if you believe there is no innovation in Europe. More innovation hands. Thank you. Sorin, economist by professor. You're now been member of parliament since in European Union since 2014. So you represent the whole Europe then. And regarding this supporting arguments that Europe is actually maybe finding its new route, I'm also quite critical. Many things that we have tried to do in Estonia, including, for example, let's say crypto, because Sorin, by the way, is a perfect example of what I see a real government person should be. He understands the new technologies like blockchain, and he tries then not to like fight against that, but tries to find a way how nations should adapt that, what useful asset it could give us, and then tries to implement that, Mission Impossible. And I wanted to say that many things which we have tried here in Estonia, let's say, when it's crypto tokens, national crypto tokens of S-coins or something, very first reaction everywhere in European Union, European Parliament, European Commission, the banks have been very critical, negative, we can't do that because X, Y, Z. Do you see that when speaking about crypto then, do you see that that Europe is totally hostile to crypto economy, and or do you see that actually it's opportunity for Europe now?
Yes, actually preparing this conversation, I have gone through the press conference of Mario Draghi when he reacted to your to the proposal you had made as raised by a journalist in a press conference. I think it was last year.
Yeah.
To be fair to Draghi, I think the question was so general that he could have understood almost anything, but probably he took the opportunity to make a point about cryptocurrencies as, let's say, official currencies. I think what he had in mind, given the relatively general nature of the question, was that there couldn't be issued by Estonia a currency that would come in addition to the monetary mass of the euro, or would replace the euro, or would be a different form of euro. No doubt, if your cryptocurrency is well designed, and I'm sure it will be well designed, you could definitely have another discussion with Draghi. If it's a form of utility, or it's clear that it's not increasing the monetary mass of euro, therefore affecting European monetary policy, no doubt this could be done. So, but this is about Draghi. So please revisit that conversation, because no doubt it's not as strict
but
as.
Speaking generally more.
Generally speaking, no human institution on earth ever likes to be disrupted, likes change. Nevertheless, in a rather paradoxical way, in Brussels, perhaps also because Brussels is a bit more insulated from immediate pressures of various kinds, there have been significant steps in the sense of accepting and adapting to the cryptocurrency space and the cryptocurrency reality, and more generally to the blockchain reality. I know it's far from perfect. For instance, just to be clear, the regime for issuing security tokens is extremely difficult nowadays, because we do need to apply the general rules for issuing securities. And that's a major hindrance, at least on this area of innovation. And I think this is a way to democratize capitalism and definitely to modernize our societies and economies, and we do need to look at that. Nevertheless, there have been good things happening in Brussels. This is what I'm humbly trying to say.
Please.
We have adopted in a relatively short time the anti-money laundering regime to accept the crypto world in it, which gives it social legitimacy, and it will make it a bit more difficult for compliance departments of banks not to accept transactions done through an exchange or a cryptocurrency broker, which has done proper KYC and which has been registered by a government. And governments are obliged, as of early 2020, to register actors in the cryptocurrency space, in order to civilize that space, to make sure there are no scams, there's no abuse, and in most cases then not, and these exceptions are used actually by the enemies of the crypto world to delegitimize this world. So bringing rules, bringing light, civilization, predictability in this space, I think is helping. It's one of the things that happened with amazing speed in European terms, again, in European terms, in a bit, roughly a year. That's one of the things that have happened. Prompted by the European Parliament itself, we control the budget, so we essentially prompted the Commission by giving them a significant budget as well, a few million euros. The Commission has recently launched what they call the EU Blockchain Observatory, which is creating a community of stakeholders and government officials at EU level, and no doubt you know about it, trying to sense the trends in this space, and it has been launched a few months back. Yeah. And to come up with intelligent regulation, with things that may lead to the rules of tomorrow. Again, it's too slow perhaps for Estonia, which is moving very fast, but things are moving in Brussels terms at relatively high speed. And there are 2 or 3 ideas that are crystallizing already, and I have been supporting, and I will continue to do so, a simplified regime, and perhaps you could take also this to your French colleagues and to President Macron. If we had a simplified regime for securities tokens, for securities ICO at European level, which would...
Raise your hand if you have part of any startup done any ICO in the past years. 1, 2. Which nations did you register that? Where do you register your company? Estonia? Island, yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask and see whether people still believe in Europe and have done something. So at least there is some activities, ICOs here, OS State. Let's come back maybe to the financial and crypto world also later, as it's very important. Thank you. Very good to have this European optimism that actually things are moving. and I see a lot of potential there. Thank you, Sorin. Nikolaj, you know this kind of thing exists as a tech ambassador in Denmark. Nikolaj, you're a deputy tech ambassador and head of secretariat at Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. And I think this is the perfect example of this today's world, that how this cross-border, location-independent kind of work disrupts nations also in a positive way, that now we don't have only ambassadors for nations, we have ambassadors for big tech corporations. And the Office of Tech Ambassador has physical offices across 3 time zones to cater the most promising companies around the world. That's, for me, seems pretty amazing. And so question to you is like, do you consider Amazon more important than Estonia? Do you see that corporations are quite equal as nations? I don't want to be too critical in a positive way, because they are, and you're showing the effort there. How to scale those? Do you see that one day Apple should get more effort than even your neighboring countries?
So the provocative answer would, of course, be yes. I think we need to separate some things here. One thing is the analysis and the power aspect. Are these companies and these big tech giants more powerful than many nations? Yes, definitely. Then the legitimacy question is another one. Do we want them to be that? No. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that that we have some companies now that have an economic might that is pretty much unprecedented. Many of these GAFAs, or more of these GAFAs, would qualify for G20 membership if they were nations.
Yeah.
Some of them, sorry, but some of them even have a GDP larger than France, or a estimated market value share bigger than France, one of the largest economies of the world. But maybe even more importantly, one thing is the economic might. You could say that oil companies have also had a similar role, or to some extent at least. But what is unprecedented in history is the penetration that these companies, private sector actors, have on a global scale, with the data and hence the knowledge that they have of us as individuals. What they know about us is something we haven't seen. No nation state, no company has ever been so powerful in that sense before. Then the question is, what do we do about that? And that is where we have made this experiment. To be honest, it is a foreign policy experiment, announcing or establishing a position of a tech ambassador or a tech embassy, if you like. And one of the critique points that we receive is going back to where we started. Are you now elevating these companies to and giving them the legitimacy as nation states, which they don't deserve? And I totally understand the logic behind that, but it misses the point, at least, of what is our intention. We are not suggesting that Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon should be members of the United Nations, not at all. But we are saying that whether we like it or not, there are new spheres of influence in the world that we need to, as nation states, to get much more engaged with and discuss and have a dialogue with, because that is the core of diplomacy. So whether we agree with them on issues or not, we need a dialogue. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorin, why are you laughing?
Yes, because, well, I would beg to humbly come with an addition here, that we might be able to do this more easily as Europeans, as Europe, and as the most important economic jurisdiction of the world, than simply and solely as nation states. But there's just a nuance. Of course, we're stronger together. We are relatively small as nations, but together we are much more powerful.
So we should establish the same thing in European Union?
No, I think the European Union itself, as a global jurisdiction, is capable of balancing out the excessive power at times, including among others multinationals.
May I just say something about this? I think this is so important. And I mean, considering the fact that we have some thinkers and also business leaders who claim that within 20, 30 years, we're going to have super intelligence, we're going to have singularity through AI. And I've actually asked myself, I mean, since I was a government representative, and here we have Assembly of Representatives in the EU, Paris, Copenhagen, where's the democratic dialogue around this? I mean, this could potentially change the course of humanity, the course on this planet, and it's only potentially 30 years away. Should we be talking about this more actively?
And it seems that Mr. Zuckerberg has like kind of started this bigger and open conversation here and in the US, and I see. Do you agree that this has been like positive like steps there to openly discuss about this biggest community and how it affects people and how European voices should be heard about that?
No, I think so. I mean, we definitely need the dialogue, and we definitely need. I mean, the Danish government's decision to do this is not to, replace regulation or legislation or even traditional diplomacy. But I think that the governance world needs to understand the tech world better, because otherwise we'll do bureaucracy and legislation in a black box that doesn't understand and that is not agile enough and will be irrelevant. But the tech sector definitely also needs to understand the political world more and understand the concepts of democracy and responsibility.
Thank you. And I would go to the second topic, and I would say that governments really need to understand us humans more. Today here we have also many people who travel around the world who can work location independently as digital nomads, as freelancers. Speaking about the mobility and immigration of the 21st century, it's a very hot topic at the moment also. Like in some nations we can see more borders, more populism, but in other nations we can see that we are going to attract more talent. And the cases I showed you before in Estonia about digital nomad visa and e-residency are some of those examples, how we try to make friends globally with foreigners and invite them here. So, and for me still it seems that the world and governments kind of don't really understand that the new generation of people are a bit different in that sense, that they need that mobility. And the more I'm traveling around the world, the more I see this pessimism about governance and this dissatisfaction. Maybe I'm like overreacting, but do you think that governance can stay relevant for the younger generation with these borders? And what government should do to be more open in this trend where we don't want mass immigration?
Well, I think one scenario we need to consider is that we might actually see politics, but also business decentralized in a way we haven't seen throughout history, through internet, the digital tools we have, blockchain, etc. Everybody is a communicator. Everybody is a little powerhouse if they want to be. And I think that's really enabled people to speak out and influence in a way which they haven't been able to do before. So that's one point of view in this. But when it comes to migration and the reaction we've had in Europe, for instance, during the last year, I think that it's a fact we've had a very large movement of people across the globe. We've had a refugee crisis, which has had an impact on the debates in each of the countries affected. And that's also had an impact on the dialogue around, skill. And I know, for instance, in Sweden, we've had a situation since 2015 when we received a lot of refugees from Syria, for instance. And now we're in a situation where we're actually forced to close our borders. And that's also affecting the capacity we have to take in skill. So this is something very debated in our country anyway. I know it is across Europe as well. But I do feel, and I mean statistics show it as well, as you pointed out, that young people actually want a world which is open. They want to be able to move across borders, both physically and digitally, without problems. And I think one of the positives was when we had Brexit, the young people actually voted against it. They wanted a unified Europe, which was a lovely thing in that context.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We built a lot of tools for the generation we speak about now. I remember, because I'm old, I'm not still young. When I was 20, I cannot study in Europe. With the facility we have now, it is very easy now. You are in France, you are in university, you want to study, to follow your first study in Germany or in Italy, or there's a program for that. So we build that, and there are people who have the mindset who the Europe concept is not only an Europe concept, the after-war concept. This is the place they live. They live with the same money, they live with no border, they can have, they can study as well in different countries. We have people married together. We have a first generation of baby coming from the Erasmus project. So this is the world we live together. We live now. In the same time, I don't know if we can compare the other move from people from Syria or something like this and refugee. According to me, and only according to me, this is not government speaking or parliament speaking, but I think we have a problem with Dublin. With the Dublin rule, that means if you put the first step in Europe, in this country, then if you are in the other country, you have to go back to the first country. Well, I think it's very easy for all the countries to have Italy and Greek. You know what I mean?
Yes. We have the same problem with digital nomad visa, which we're at the moment putting together. Then how do we chase that he's not leaving Estonia for longer than next days? And it all seems a bit silly. Further comments?
Yes, well, I think the future of citizenship and political legitimacy is decentralized as well. So governments will have, this will be a two-way street. The first way you have already begun to show very powerfully in Estonia, so the government's providing public services via digital tools in a much more effective way and commonsensical way, wasting less time and energy for the people. And I think for young people, this is almost as is a given nowadays. They sometimes detest human interaction in a public office. They do prefer things to happen quickly and well. Digitally, but I believe there will be the other way, which will be taking shape soon. I would call it a form of digital citizenship. People will be able to provide input to governments and constrain governments and help with decision-making by governments more and more, and not in the ad hoc way it's happening on Facebook, spontaneous groups and so on, but in a systematic way. That's why I call it citizenship. People will be able to form groups, to mobilize, to form political parties, but also to provide for civic engagement in their community, in their region, nationally, and maybe globally, but definitely at European level. So I believe governments have to not only see this coming, but have to nurture this trend and to move in this direction with this double-way street. So it's a matter of time until a lot of our political and civic action will happen around our digital identity, digital citizenship, and the political establishment and institutions will have to adjust to that reality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No, maybe just to echo, I think there's huge potential in leveraging technology in order to tackle some of the issues with migration, both with the whole digital citizenship, blockchain technology, and so on, but also using, in a broader sense, technologies like big data. We have a project in the Danish government in cooperation with IBM and Danish Refugee Council to see, can we use big data to foresee migration flows better in order for us to do smarter humanitarian aid in Africa. But I think even more importantly is the strategic question that, digitization and the fourth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it, is going to create new winners and losers on a global scale. the nations, the societies, the individuals that are able to jump the digital train and reap the benefits of it are going to be winners, and those who are not are going to be losers. And as an international society, nations among, we need to make sure that we create a digital dividend and get as many as possible on board, because otherwise we'll see a totally different range of migration flows and other issues.
Mm-hmm. Sorin, you wanted to comment? No. So I'll give you. We had a breakfast today with the e-residents also, and although the funny thing is that e-residents nowadays don't have to visit Estonia anymore, they more and more want to do that. And e-residency was never intended to make e-residents to residents and then to citizens, but kind of the flow automatically goes like that. First you become e-resident, then you kind of fall in love into nation, you have some relationship, we start communicating, you sometimes visit the old town, let's say, and you want to have more connections, and sometimes you bring teams here, and sometimes then you want to become a resident, and now those guys accidentally all said, kind of, I want to now start living here. So for us it seems like a good first easier move to build the connections and have this smart immigration. And I wonder how different nations will start competing for these talents, who can now work location independently. And do you think that your nations, where you're from, let's say, are taking any like moves stronger there to, not speaking about refugees, speaking about smart immigration and knowledge workers, putting very effort to attract the best talent to your nations? Do you see any like strategic moves there? No?
Tough one.
I think there's capacity to do more, so to speak. And that's where I feel that Estonia has done a really good job, both in promoting yourselves, but also building a system to enable this. And again, I think most countries here are aware of the fact that global talent supply is going to be one of the main issues ahead in order to stay competitive and grow economically. But again, I think Europe is in a certain context currently, which is also having an effect on how we attract talent to our continent.
Thanks. A few minutes left. Do you have questions? Do write them. I wanted to go back to the financial world, Sorin, which is interesting in these times. I personally believe that Europe has a second chance given by some almighty God to attract entrepreneurs instead of them going to Silicon Valley, to attract them here, to have this legislation environment which supports token sales, supports fintechs, etc. We had before discussion and we reached to conclusions, I think that everyone wants to do that, but somehow the European Union, how it's built, doesn't allow to have these sandboxes of ideas in different nation states, and then eventually we can't make that happen. Do you have any reflections on that? What are your moves? Why can't we, let's say in Estonia, test and have these crypto token sales done differently, and not with all those prospects necessary to do it? Why can't we do that?
Okay, so we were talking about tokens as securities,
yes,
which if you issue securities in Europe, you have to respect a number of legislation, of rules rooted in legislation, let's say from the old times, the old age, the typical securities rules, Prospectus Directive, MiFID, and another set of rules, which is extremely cumbersome for a small company. You have a great idea, you need to raise 2, 3, 5, 10 million euros, and then you have to respect this whole set of gigantically difficult rules. And those are European rules indeed, so there is something of a hurdle there. Now, the idea would be, and then of course, how do we get there, which is even more important maybe than the idea, it would be great to have a regime for a European sandbox, or a European-level sandbox regime, which could then be activated by member states who want to test out the technology, who want to test out, including via ICOs, how this trend of democratizing capitalism and putting supply and demand for, for equity for small innovative projects could play out. Now, the truth is that this being a new technology and a new trend, it has still a relatively small constituency in Europe and throughout the world. It is also true that it being disruptive, most people of the old establishment, and that doesn't necessarily mean they are evil and acting in bad faith, but the old institutions of the older economy tend to resist that. Banks are famously unsympathetic to this development.
Obviously, yeah.
So we need to find policy entrepreneurs and key allies in Europe to make sure this.
Speaking about key allies,
France.
We have France here, we have Sweden here, we have Denmark here, we have Estonia here. Let's promise all together, take that to next level, to have that sandbox, and you have 4 countries already supporting it.
Okay, and I will do my best to make sure my country joins us, which is, by the way, and I avoided the previous question because unfortunately Romania is an IT powerhouse, but not at governmental level, all right, or political establishment level. That's a different story. Yes.
Thank you. Do you have a question from audience?
On behalf of Paulina, let me ask that. When will EU move from national citizenships to EU citizenships, and will it ever happen?
Ooh.
Ooh, please.
Any volunteers?
I guess I'm duty-bound to take that up. Well, I mean, legally speaking, we do have EU citizenship, but that is strictly based on national citizenship. You're a national of Estonia or Sweden, you are an EU national. Now, the question is about whether people would be willing to invest their identity and their spontaneous love, let's say, or loyalty into this new identity. And there are, it varies across member states, but there are people in Europe who feel they are equally European as, Poles or Germans or French. And there are people who feel a stronger attachment to their nation state, as they have been called here, rather than to Europe. And there's a small minority that actually feels more European than belonging to the nation state. However, the question is extremely interesting because it's as if it's anticipating something that I'm going to suggest, building on what I was saying earlier about digital citizenship. I believe we could create a form of European digital citizenship, not imposed top-down from Brussels, but building on the nation states of Europe. And this could create a stronger bond between European citizens and Europe, and depending on how each individual member state may want to use this, it could also help build this two-way street that I was hinting at earlier between citizens and political establishments and institutions, also at national level. However, there's no absolute answer to that question now. Trust is always an issue of process and of being built in time. You cannot decree European citizenship beyond what we have done already. That it's based on national citizenship. So that is built in time.
Any other comments? Just from the e-residence side, soon this digital identity should be accepted by other EU member states, which kind of means that if you're e-resident of Estonia, you soon become e-resident of Europe, and you can start entering different services in European Union at least. So there is some progress to have already that identity there. More questions? So last minute, very quickly each, open question. Do you have any disruptive ideas what the future of governance should be or will be? How the technology disrupts this verse? Do we have ministries in the future in the first place, for example?
Well, I certainly hope that we have democracy, that's important, and that we stay global and digital, whereas also considering security, personal integrity, and seemingly we seem to be going that direction.
Thank you.
Democracy for sure, progress on that. And the last question was very interesting about the European citizen. I don't know if it came from country or by the top, but at the end, the European identity, the European way of life should be something we can share and we can build. That's something I hope for a long time now. Even if in my country, when you ask people, and that's what we said, there are some people that saying that they are Breton, they are Basque before being Français and before being European. But at the end, the objective and the target of the European concept could be more massively shared. This is what we are doing day by day, I think.
Thank you. Please.
Okay. Yeah, for instance, I do see a world of governance where a ministry could instantaneously consult the entire population of the country via their digital identity on a certain project, on a certain major decision.
Thank you.
And that would be quite disruptive, I think. For
That
the way
would lose some intermediaries straight away.
Well, I'm working for the state of Denmark, so I guess I'm a little bit biased here, but I don't believe in the death of the nation state. I believe that governance is extremely important, because even though people associated with the world of bureaucracy and all that, it's about people being solidary with each other and finding joint solutions. And I think we need that both at the nation state level and at the European level.
Thank you. I would like to conclude and say that I'm a huge fan of nations also myself. I'll try to make all of them more relevant to today's new generation. And I hope that at least this 40 or so minutes a little bit helped us to see the wider perspectives from the Europe and to have a huge hope that actually the values of European Union and the states that we have here are very progressive. Some things may take time, but this is a good environment to start business and to live our lives. Thank you. The time is up, and let's have a warm hands again to the audience.